Beginning in the 1970s as a mail-order catalog, the Surfcaster has long been known as the source for hard-to-find surf fishing gear, and I've been personally shopping with them since the 1980s. They offer honest advice and the best recommendations regardless of your experience level, and will tailor their suggestions to what you actually need.
As you would expect from a business that's been serving the surfcasting community for 50 years, their prices are competitive and delivery is always quick and secure. They want you to have the best possible experience in the surf and have the knowledge and inventory to put the right gear in your hands to make that happen. So check out the Surfcaster at www.thesurfcaster.com, and if you're in the area, stop into their brand new brick and mortar store in Shelton, Connecticut.
Welcome to another episode of the Surfcast Podcast. We got somewhat of a special installment for you today. We're going to do a little bit of an interview, but it's going to be a short form interview, not the longer hour long, just a little something we want to jump into today. So our guest is Dennis Zambrotta. You're probably very familiar with Dennis. He's been on the podcast before. Also the author of Surfcasting Around the Block, Surfcasting Around the Block 2 as well. Two excellent books which should be in your library right now. Dennis has done a bunch of articles and things over the years, so thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, thank you very much, Toby. Appreciate it. Love to be here.
Actually, I'm going to do one more suggested reading. In the most recent edition of Surfcasters Journal, which is out now, you do have to subscribe to read this, so, disclaimer. Dennis did an excellent, very special article about Clifton Tallman, who was born in the late 1800s, and Dennis spent a lot of time at the Historical Society in Newport gathering his logs and his photos and some words from these logs, and it's really something special. I feel honored that SJ got it. Thank you, Dennis, for that, but I really want to point that out. You should definitely check it out. So, yeah. Put that in there.
We'll drop the links to the books as well as the SJ edition in the show notes for sure. And again, to read the SJ article, you should be subscribing anyway, but you'll have to subscribe for that one. So.
Yeah.
But the topic for today is something that Dennis has written about a couple of times. There was an article in The Fisherman that was run. I know Saltwater Edge has had an article on it, but we figured we'd get his one-on-one discussion working through the process of the combination of fishing specifically a red fin with a red gill teaser. And I was kind of thinking about this, some summertime stuff leading into the fall, and in my mind, this is if I'm trying to kill a skunk, get into some fish, have some fun, this is the kind of thing that jumps into my mind. So we thought it would be a great subject to pass along to the listeners and the viewers of the Surfcast podcast. So that's where this came about. And I think probably the best way to start, Dennis, would be to kind of describe, tell your story that you were telling me when we recently talked about this, about how it kind of came about for you, how you had that revelation of the power of these two lures when put together.
Well, what first got me into the teaser aspect of it, I mean, my first exposure to teasers was probably back in the 1970s when obviously no internet. Everything is read. That's how you research when you're, a young surfcaster. And I read the complete book of striped bass fishing by Hal Lyman and Frank Wilner. And it's a 1954 book. And I was going through one of the chapters in there, and on chapter 3, I think it was, on plugs and different type of surf lures, they started talking about using a dropper in front of a lure. And their droppers back then was like a bucktail jig, like a weighted head bucktail jig ahead of their lure, or a plain hook and a pork rind. And so I looked at this and I'm going, wow, I love trying stuff, especially stuff that these two authors wrote about, and I know they're successful on it. And I started to fish them here in Newport. I tried the bucktail first. That didn't go so well. You got two weighted things, and casting was a mess. But I bucktailed and pork rind a lot of bridges back then, and I said, I'm just going to use a pork rind on a hook. And the first night I put one on, I mean, like I took 2 or 3 bass all on the pork rind. The only drawback back then was pork rinds tend to flop around, and every once in a while they'll go across the point of the hook, and you'll get a strike and you'll have them on for a second, but that's all you'll have them on for a second. It'll come off, and then your pork rind is wrapped around the point of the hook, and then you understand why you didn't have a good hookup. But that got me going, and then I started reading stuff about feathers. I got my buddy Zeke into doing it, and then Frank Dano started talking about putting hackle, 4 or 5 hackle feathers on a hook to kind of simulate sand eels up on the Cape. And then eventually it evolved into finding about the red gill. And that is also an item that I found out about through Frank Dano's writings, was the red gill, which was brought over from England by a friend of his. And there's a big story about that that anybody that reads like 20 years on the Cape would find out about, all that history. These rubber things were meant for jigging codfish and stuff off of boats, in England. And the guy brought them to the Cape. They're a dead ringer for sand eels. That's what they're made to imitate. And what better place to play around with them than on Cape Cod? So Frank did a really good job. I started to use them, and they caught fish like crazy, when fish were finicky.
And these were the smaller ones, you like the
Yeah, the Rascal size, the 4.5-inch Red Gill Rascal. I mean, they made a couple different sizes. They made a real tiny one, and then they made a bigger one. And then they made a thing that I remember, but I never fished, but I heard about from Tony Sharapo, and it was the Red Gill Pilchard, which was a little bit bigger body. It was probably, more like what we would consider a shad nowadays. Bigger bodied red gill, and Tony told me he used to kill fish with that. I never even bought one, and those are not spoken around, about much anymore.
Yeah. It could have been a piece of spaghetti and Tony be catching fish.
I've caught striped bass on pieces of t-shirt, that. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did the combo happen, though? How did you end up arriving at this conclusion that there was something special about red gill and red fin?
Well, when I first started using teasers, it was with a Rebel, the old Rebel wind cheater super minnows. And eventually that plug went away. By the time the red gills really got, this might be confusing to some of your listeners, but by the time the red gills really started to get popular, about the same time, the Cotton Cordell Red Fins started getting really popular. Myself and my casting partner, Zeke, transitioned from Rebels to Red Fins. And the 7-inch Red Fin. And it was just that transition happened right about the same time. The red gills came out, the Red Fins came out, and we said, oh, we'll just start using these with what we're now using, the Red Fins. And we found it was like a deadly combination. And, we're fishing it again with a floating lure, a good casting lure, which the red fin, if you load a red fin, is great casting. And you're allowed, you can fish it very, very slow, which some nights is what they want, you can basically crawl that thing, and it was the perfect combination to throw in boulder fields. Red fin keeps the red gill out of the weed for the most part, and you can crawl it along. And it was just a great combination, and we took quite a few fish on it.
Bet if you added it up, more striped bass were caught from the surf last year on plastic swimmers than any other plug. Probably even more than bucktails. The reason is simple. For generations, the plastic swimmer has proven to be a versatile, effective, and affordable fish catching machine.
And that's where the new Hogi OG Swimmer comes in. Unlike most of the other modern swimmers that all look and act alike, the OG Swimmer brings together a traditional design with modern enhancements to offer anglers with a unique and highly effective swimming plug unlike anything else currently on the market. With a unique wobbling action, it moves like an injured baitfish, and it's a large profile, chunky and tubular, and measuring in at 7 inches. Plus, with a downturn line tie, the OG Swimmer stays shallow, making it ideal for surf anglers.
All of this is tied together in an extra hard body that's through wired and decked out with VMC hooks and a hand-tied bucktail teaser. And just like the Hogi needlefish, you won't find a rear hook on this lure, which is better for the fish, better for your hands, and easier on your wallet. This is all part of the Hook One platform, as well as Hogi's new core philosophy, quality for today, conservation for tomorrow. To find out more about this mission, and to pick up one of these premium OG swimmers, be sure to check out www.hogilures.com.
Okay, so here's an interesting story about how we found out about the slow presentation. So my buddy Zeke and I were fishing a local beach here in Newport one night. Zeke fished a conventional reel, 7,000 and a 10-foot rod. We're both using red gills with a red fin. Zeke takes a cast. He has a backlash. So the cast lands about 30 feet out. And obviously he has to pull out this backlash. So as he's pulling out the backlash, all of a sudden, like all the line starts getting pulled off his reel. I mean, the plug is not even moving other than bobbing up and down out in the wash. And it ends up, this fish in the 30-pound class sucked in his red gill while it was just floating around out there, bobbing up and down in the little bit of a wave action that we had. And he couldn't pull the backlash out in time. So he ends up fighting this fish with a knot on the reel. The fish can't take any more line because it's knotted up. He ends up landing this fish. He just keeps backing up out of the surf. And he pulls this thing in, and it's flopping around, and it's just sucked in that red gill. And I was like astounded. He was astounded. You know, I said, well, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good.
Yeah,
You know?
right.
But just kind of an interesting side story.
That would make me want to, like, every so often take a cast and just stand there with it and see what happens.
I'm going to now.
Yep.
I'm going to.
Yeah, right? I'm going to have to.
Yeah, for real. Is that typically where you start, Dennis? Do you typically start with a slow retrieve with it? With this combo?
Yeah, I mean, it's for the most part, most of my retrieves at night are all slow anyway. It's one of those things I learned, until I started fishing rig deals, and then I was like, what? You can fish those faster? It was just one of those. In the beginning, everything was slow at night, slow at night, slow at night. So I kind of, everything was fished slow. In daylight, we kind of played around with it a little bit more. Hesitation and using different things, but and maybe speed it up, jerk it around a little bit, to try and tease fish into it. But at night, it was kind of, if you watch striped bass at night, a lot of times when if you see them feeding on sand eels, they are very slow and deliberate. They just come up and they'll sip a sand eel off the surface like they're, like a trout sipping a midge. They will suck them right in. So we were just trying to, kind of mimic what we always had done and mimic what striped bass want. So
now, do you think that do you find it produces only when there's sand eels around, or just kind of it's a small bait with the teaser up ahead? So
sand eels are primarily when they seem to work best. But I use them basically whenever, I start getting one of, those excuse me hits is what we used to call them, a bump here and a bump there. Um, that then you start going, well, I know something's there. What could it be? I mean, I've had weird stuff bumping, presentations at night. I mean, there are a few years we were catching pollock,
Mm.
which is like, what keeps hitting my swivel? I was watching them hit my swivel. Like, what is hitting a swivel? A black swivel at night.
Yeah.
And I put a hook on my swivel, just a plain hook with a split ring, like a small hook, and I caught it. And it was like these like harbor pollock. They were about a pound. And I'm like, no wonder these things are driving us crazy. So that's when I start experimenting, when I know the fish are there, but they're a little bit hesitant and they're a little bit more selective, and you've got to drop down in size. Again, back in the old days, these we're catching fish. I know they generally catch smaller fish, and but back then, that's what you could still take those things to market.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, it's not the thing that most people will use like nowadays because, oh well, I'm not fishing for little fish, but you gotta remember the reason these things developed and what the rules and regs were at the time and why people used them. So,
Interesting.
I mean,
Yeah.
Interesting. So, Toby, he said something interesting. I'm wondering if you caught it. Talk to me a little bit about teasers in the day. Talk to me a little bit about that, because I feel like that's something that I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm out of touch, but I feel like that's pretty rare. So, talk to me a little bit about that.
oh yeah, I mean, we all know how good bucktails are in the day, and a lot of my bucktail presentations are small. I mean, I go down to, quarter ounce at times. And that size is basically 3 to 4 inches, maybe, and we know how selective fish can be in the daylight. And you got to go small. You got to go. Back then, I mean, everything was mono, so we would you know go lighter with the mono or lighter leader, trying to get these fish to bite when they're so selective. And Lord knows when they are on sand eels in the daylight, there's a lot of times when the only way you're going to get those fish is to throw a stick of dynamite in the water because they will not touch anything. And in those times, I mean, sometimes they would hit a red gill, and so that was the first thing we did. Oh, these fish are not hitting at all. There are thousands of them here. They're rolling around in clouds of sand eels, and we can't get them to bite. Um, Put a red gill on. Maybe we'll get a couple.
Hmm.
Come back after dark, and we would get a lot. Just let it get dark a little bit. But daylight teasers. There's a lot of guys now that out on block that would use a tin with a red gill or a tin with a feather,
Hmm.
and just to present the teaser basically.
Yeah, it becomes just the casting weight to deliver the the
Yeah.
later.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the big thing. There's a couple drawbacks about using them, and the drawbacks I find are, the casting distance is definitely affected. Um, the other drawback is we would when you'd catch them in a boulder field, if they were really on the teaser, then you had to land them in that boulder field with a plug trailing that fish as you're trying to get it through bubbleweed, and what it becomes a real pain in the neck.
Yes, it
I mean,
does.
you'll end up breaking your plugs off and things like that. And so I mean, there are drawbacks to using them on a sand beach. That's the opportune time to use them because you don't usually have anything you have to worry about. I know, Toby, you mentioned something about you just got to make sure that if you hook it on the plug, you don't have that flying teaser
Catch it in the face.
wanting to
Yep.
get you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, there is that, and occasionally you do get double headers. I mean, back then it was a novelty to get them. Now people would like, why do I want to catch two 20-inch fish?
Mm.
There is that. So,
So, so
but go ahead.
I have a couple of essential questions I want to get to before we end. And Toby, I'm jumping in here. Sorry. The first is, I'm sure it's evolved a lot, but today, what hook do you use with that Red Gill? What hook? Because the one it
hook.
comes
Well,
with, can we agree that the one it comes with is junk?
Oh, yeah, yeah. If I've not bought any new ones in a while. But yeah, I mean, the original hook was like, it had a little S on the end of it. Like, oh yeah, just kind of tie a slip knot around this thing. I mean, it was, I know, it was really, really bad.
They're not much better
back in
now.
the day-
They're not much better now.
back-
If you haven't
yeah,
bought one
back
in
in
a
the
while.
day, most of the guys would switch to O'Shaughnessy hooks, I think 3407, the Mustad, and then back in the old days, I switched from that to an Eagle Claw stainless steel hook, that was kind of offset, so I had to set them straight with a pair of vice grips, so that they didn't have the offset on them. And I love that hook on them, but they eventually discontinued that. I think that was a 777 Eagle Claw. And then nowadays, I go with the Mustad has like a tarpon hook they call a C68.
Fly hook, right? One of their
Yeah, it's a fly hook, and it's a 2X strong hook. Um, you got, I mean, for any of your listeners that want to play around with them, you can use any hook, but get a strong hook because there are occasions when you may hook that nice fish and you want to land it, or you're going to hook two fish at the same time, which you want that hook. There's going to be a lot of torque and stress on that hook. So C68, and I use 30, 40, or 50, depending on what fish have been in the area. Yeah.
What about the rest of your setup from your main line? I'm assuming you use a swivel. What do you run for a dropper, and then a length to your plug?
Basically I still use a barrel swivel to like a 50 or 60 pound leader to my plug. And I generally will go, so if my leader is 60, my main leader to the plug, I will drop my dropper leader to the Red Gill to 50. I'll go 10 pounds less than my leader strength. Okay, because the idea back in the old days was, if you're gonna hook two big fish, you want the teaser to break off, not your, $15, $20 plug. If they're going to battle it out, and they do, something's going to give, and you want the teaser to give because they're easier and they're only $2.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was the idea behind it. I've only lost a couple battles over the years where both fish are pretty nice. The biggest doubleheader I've ever seen was a partner of mine. Al got an over 40-pound double. Like both fish were in the 20-pound class. Yeah, that was on Block Island.
So,
That was wild. He thought he had a monster.
yeah.
He had almost 40 to 45 pounds of weight when he was trying to land it, and when it came in, I go, I'm down there helping him out because he said, Dennis, this is a good one. And I'm like, Al, you get two, bud.
It's two okay ones, not
Yeah,
one good
you
one.
get two. Yeah. So, I mean, that's my rig, my leader length. I generally, when I'm using a teaser, is probably 24 inches. I find the longer leader you go, it's really hard to get that torque to cast it. Again, the casting distance is going to suffer with a dropper on and a red gill. I found it a lot easier to fish them back in the old days with mono than I do now with braid. I'm using braid now, but what drives me crazy sometimes is the leader, the red gill dropper leader, twirling around the braid. And with mono, it's just a matter of flip, 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 and it's off. With braid, I mean, if something pulls on it, now you got a knot that my eyes, I can't see those stupid knots. It's twisting around and squeezing that mono. I have to kind of stop everything, go back, cut everything off. So with braid, it's a little bit more difficult. I had a friend of mine that years ago told me he used wire leader material. The plastic coated wire leader material, and he would tie a knot with that onto the barrel, and he said that worked a lot better. I never tried it, but that was something that came out there, and he said, "Oh, I never have tangle problems when I went to wire." I said, "Fish still bite it?" He says, they still bite it." Yeah. So, yeah.
That's interesting. I don't want to take up too much time because we have one more question I definitely want to ask. But I have experimented with going the opposite of what you're doing. So my leader will be 50, occasionally 30, but I hate it even on the sand. It makes me very nervous. And then my teaser, I'll do 60 or 80. And that stiffer piece kind of keeps it stuck out further and doesn't allow it to wrap around. And I've also played with the length to try to keep it shorter and shorter and shorter, and that helps too. But because I'm like, well, if I lose something, whatever. But I'm generally also using them in the sand, and I'm not worried about hanging up that plug on something. And I've never had a double header, so that's just my bad luck, I guess. Or maybe it's good luck.
Maybe that was the idea of the wire too. That was his. He probably got aggravated by it happening all the time too. So I played around with that too. So
So Toby, can I ask the last question before we finish?
Absolutely.
So Dennis, Toby and I were talking about this earlier. I'm not a color guy. Toby, you're not a color guy.
On the teasers.
No, in general, right? In general, we're not really color guys, right? We're not like, oh, you got it.
Not too bought in.
Yeah, exactly. Even though I've written articles about it and I have some theories and there's some things I continue to play. But when it comes to teasers, I can't think of anything else I care less about than color. I will throw on anything that's in my pocket. It can be macro colored, it can be black, it could be white, it could be... But I'm probably doing something wrong. What do you think about that? What do you think?
With the red gills, I mean, my favorite overall color is flat out black. The black red gill for most occasions, other than daylight, is what I use. Daylight, I will, if I know I'm just going to fish daytime, for the most part, I will go with either straight white, or I'll go red gill made like a black back and silver body, or a blue back and silver body.
Yes.
And that's what I would go in daylight. Now, the other thing that I learned that I could do with the white ones is I used green Sharpies. And you can kind of Sharpie the back of, if you wanted more of a green presentation for the sand eels, you could easily do that with the green Sharpie marker. And it kind of stays with the plug. It doesn't wash out. So
shout out quickly to Goose Hummock. They have like knockoff ones, or at least they did, and they make a green. They make a green back, white or silvery, pearly sort of body. So it's definitely a rip off of the red gill, but still, just shout out to them because that's a cool color. So,
even the red gills, they're not that easy. I mean, the original ones are to get nowadays. I mean, there are a few people that kind of had them. I know Saltwater Edge had some sort of deal with them a long time ago to be a distributor. That must have folded out. I'm not sure, but now, try to find black ones. Black ones are the ones I'm always looking for.
So hard to get. Yeah.
They're hard to find.
Yeah.
So there you go with the magic marker again, okay?
Yeah. I was just looking. I have 2 bags of them on my plug wall here, so it's probably It's got to be 15 red gills, like the small ones. And I'm looking at the colors. There's some black, some of the whites. I have these that I fished all the time when I used to throw them. They're orange, like an orange and white.
Yep.
That was another color. I mean, again, but I don't know how much it made a difference because I, like Jerry, I'd put on whatever I happened to have.
Oh, one last thing. I mean,
Yes.
they will catch without that little nub of a tail, but a lot of times they won't.
Yeah.
I mean, that nub of that tail is super important, especially if you're crawling it along very, very slowly. Because I've had nights when if that nub was gone, like, why am I not catching fish anymore? You look at it and it ripped off. And make sure that thing is still there.
Totally
Keep
agree.
checking.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
And in fact, I've had at least one night I'm thinking about, so it's probably more, but where the fish were taking the plug, but only if it had a teaser. But the teaser, when the tail came off, they stopped taking the plug.
I still had I had very similar experiences, Jerry,
Yeah.
with that. One over in Westport, Mass, where I put the teaser on. All of a sudden, they killed the plug. I took the teaser off. They didn't want the plug. And it was like, oh, there's some sort of predator relationship going in there.
Yeah.
Don't eat that teaser. I'm going to get you. That kind of thing.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this was great. We hope everyone enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. There's definitely things you said that I had never heard before, and I feel like I've read everything and feel like we've talked to stuff, but you still said things I hadn't heard before. So it was really great. So thank you so much for coming on for this shorter interview, weekly episode. Toby, I'll kick it to you, whatever you want to say.
Yeah, no, as I always appreciate you got coming to help us. You got me thinking. Again, I got some red gills here. I might have to use them this year. I might break down, add it to the things I break down and do this year. You got me amped to throw some red gills. So good on you for that.
Well, it was my pleasure. I always enjoy talking with you guys because it allows me to still kind of relate some of these stories. As long as I can still remember them. I always try to put things in writing or talk about them because then they can be archived and people can understand why things are happening. When, I just think of that article I wrote about Tallman, him writing stuff. And I'm like, oh God, I would have never known that if he hadn't put it in his writing.
Yeah.
And so that some of that stuff is super interesting and getting history documented is important.
Yeah. So thank you, Dennis.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
This has been a weekly edition of the Surfcast Podcast. You can find out more about the podcast at surfcastpodcast.com or definitely check us out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, at the Surfcast Podcast.